So I want to talk about this lens because I own it, and this is what we do, right? We talk about stuff that we own on YouTube. This lens is awesome. It has incredible image quality, wide open, all the way through the rest of the aperture range. It's basically, other than it being a little larger than I would prefer, I'm not sure if I'm going to buy another 50mm lens unless I change camera systems for some reason. It's just awesome. I can probably use this lens for a very, very, very long time without having to upgrade it. The lens is larger than the 1.4 GM. The thing about that with the weight, though, is that it's not really that big of a deal, especially if you compare against the original manufacturers for Nikon and Canon. It is actually the lightest out of all of them. So it's actually really great in terms of the usability. It feels good on the camera. It never feels too heavy. I can shoot with it all day with no problem. So when I go back and forth between my 35 or 24 to the 50, it doesn't feel that heavy when you're actually shooting with it. It's only when you're like, doing the measurables. But anyways, some things I'm going to talk about with this lens is going to be the image quality. I want to talk about the wide open performance a bit. I also want to talk about the statement that you should always shoot the lens wide open. I guess somebody at some point said if you have a lot of lens elements in a lens, all of a sudden it doesn't render very well. It might just be well corrected and sharp, but it doesn't have any depth. It doesn't have three-dimensionality, and they say other like derogatory things that to me they've never been able to demonstrate. So let's keep going on this, and let's actually show some more images, and I'll talk about them a bit. Here's a portrait, and generally speaking, I would expect people to use this lens in a similar kind of way. I wouldn't get much closer than this. At 50mm, if you start getting really, really close, you'll get quite a bit of distortion on the face sometimes, but sometimes people are fine with that. I think this is a pretty good distance for you to get with a lens like this, and you can achieve some really, really nice images. In this one, just to try to show it can have 3D pop, it can have 3D rendering, it can have this idea of depth, and that at 1.2 it is incredibly sharp, right on the eye right there. It is extremely sharp. At this distance, wide open, it's going to be super, super sharp. In fact, it can be so sharp across the plane of focus that what I would recommend doing is something similar like I did. This is a finished image. I never show people just straight out of camera images because that's not how I shoot. And what I did here is I created a mask that it's just a circle, and then it's nice and soft going out stronger and stronger toward the edges, and I soften. Okay, here's another shot. You can just see how sharp this image is. Right there on the eye, super, super sharp, and then it falls away. Especially for portraits, I don't think you need any sharper of a lens. This one here, this is an example of where I think the lens works really, really well. And it is these longer shots that you shoot wide open. And what I want to point out about this is the background, okay? This kind of shot, if you've ever shot an EF, a Canon EF 50mm f1.4 or a 1.2, you'll know what I'm talking about. Or if you shot a Zeiss planar, you'll know what I'm talking about the fringing in the bokeh in the background, okay? A lot of those lenses have aberrations back here, and especially in a situation like this where you've got the sky against these twiggy branches, it gets distracting. There'll be green or magenta or both aberrations that can appear in the background and get really distracting. The great thing about this lens is it doesn't have that. It has a very nice soft rendering. It does not have like where the background highlights kind of poke you in the eye. It does not have aberrations that can be, like I said, distracting, and you get a nice kind of melt into the background, okay? I think that this lens really does excel at getting longer shots like this. That's it on the portraits to kind of illustrate what I wanted to talk about. The other thing that I'm going to do is show you some more images and talk about depth rendering at 1.2 with this lens, okay? Because I see a lot of people that seem to complain about it but can't demonstrate it. I used to work in stereography, and one of the things that we knew working in stereography was how important shadows, highlights, and lighting and all of that was to showing where depth was supposed to be, because that shows like rounding to it. Is this perfect lighting for a headshot? Probably not, but to show depth, yes it does, and I'll show why. We're at 1.2, this is the same lens, this is the 50mm 1.2 GM, we're focused here on the eye, and this nose just pops out to us, okay? It does to me, and it's because of the shadows, and it's because of the highlights and the way that the lighting is, okay? This forehead looks round because it's got this highlight here, and then it kind of fades into a gradient, okay? And especially here on the cheek, when we look right here, we get a sense of depth because we know in our brains, our brains are telling us there's a light source coming from over here, and it's rounding back like this because when I see stuff be hit by lights in real life, this is how something with volume to it has shade on it. When something has volume, it'll have shade like this, and it tricks our brain, and I do mean tricks, it deceives us into seeing this as having more depth to it because of the shadows, okay? It's because of the lighting and the contrast that does that. It's a lot less the lens and a lot more everything else. This is a hummingbird that I shot at 1.2. This is with the A7R III, and it's super sharp, okay? Like, I was able to capture this guy going around even with the A7R III that doesn't have the fastest autofocus in the world, and I was able to grab it, okay? And this is again at 1.2, and it's cropped in, and this guy's just super sharp. Another image here, this is at the Getty Villa Museum. Lots of texture. I can promise you that if you're worried about, like, you know, am I going to get it sharp enough at 1.2? Am I going to get enough texture? Am I going to get it like where I can get that micro contrast or that really, you know, cool texture that I want out of a lens like this? Yeah, it will be no problem. I mean, look at this. Okay, lots of texture, lots of sharpness, lots of contrast. The nose just comes right out at me, and you get I mean, even at 1.2, you get stellar images. I mean, super close up, like close focus image quality at 1.2. This moth, I was able to quickly grab with the A7R5, and this is cropped in a bit, but this is like at the closest focus distance, okay? And you can see here, he's super sharp, okay? This moth is absolutely sharp as crap. Now, granted, I do everything through DXO Photolab 6, so I use either the deep prime or the deep prime with extra detail, either one of those. When I want like an image to look how I want, DXO Photolab is able to get me exactly what I want pretty much every time. Last image I want to show at 1.2 is this one of this flower because I want to point something out. If you're using this lens at 1.2 and you're shooting items like this, what I recommend is at least experimenting with changing where you're focusing. And I see it all the time where it'll be a flower and the only thing that's in focus is like the very edge of a petal, and then it just obliterates everything else and you don't really know what you're looking at. Here at 1.2, I focused in the middle because I wanted to see what would happen to get like at 1.2, you know, the front and the back of it, what it would look like. And I like this image at 1.2. I much prefer this over shooting where I'm only getting like the very edge of the petal of this thing in focus, okay? But what I do recommend is if you are shooting flowers especially and stuff like this, is to stop down, okay? If you stop down the lens, I think you're going to get much better results, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. that's really it for this one. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. My opinion on the lens is that, you know, if you want image quality up the wazoo, the 50mm 1.2 G Master is hard to beat. I don't know if there's another lens that really can beat it on the mount. I think it's just incredible. I use it all the time now instead of my 35, which is annoying because I really used to be a 35 guy, and I still use the 35 and the 24 when I'm going out to a place and I'm not going to have another chance to come back, and the 50 might stay home. But if I'm going to a place the second time, I bring the 50 just because I think it's so awesome. And it gives me really, really good image quality without me having to really do anything. I just shoot, and it just does all the work, which is fantastic. And then when I get into post, I can do all kinds of really, really great stuff with my images, and I get all the results that I could possibly ask for out of a lens. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped you make a decision on, you know, this lens or that lens or whatever lens you might be thinking of over the 51.2. And that's really it. Until I see you next time.